Man, have I had a hard day. I can't wait to watch some YouTube. Let's see what's going on today. E3. Something with Superman. Ah, Shoe's got a new video. Hey, Armor Skeptic. I love Armor Skeptic. I mean, yeah, he's an atheist and a skeptic. But you know what I love about him is that he's not into all that conspiracy stuff like the mythicists are. Oh, I can't wait to watch this video.
Well, if we look at the Christian Bible through the lens of history, we see that it was actually compiled by the Romans as a way to reunite their divided empire. By creating a new cultural identity that put them all under a single god, it helped focus the Roman people under a single banner. What we now know as the Christian religion was not created because Constantine had a change of heart. Constantine didn't give up about Jesus. It was created as a political move.
What the? Hey, this is Ramon Channel Alpha 4, and humorous intro aside, I actually am a little disappointed in Armor Skeptic. He usually does a better job of staying away from conspiracy. But this time he kind of dove in. So I thought I'd counter. Now, just to be clear, I have my own video on Dr. Brown, and on the exact same video actually, and I'm not a fan of the situation or his approach in reaching out. I find him a little, I don't know. And I'm also not a fan of the Vigilant Christian. I'm going to make some videos on his stuff soon. But why am I making this video? Well, because I would like to correct some of the stuff that Armor Skeptic said, and I would also like to present some information for everyone. Now, here's the challenge. I am going to try to give you the history of Christianity and the Abrahamic faith using as minimal biblical sources as possible. That means I'm going to try not to use any biblical sources unless I absolutely have to. I'm going to try using only extra biblical sources, only sources outside the Bible to prove what I have to say about the Bible. I will be showing the books that I have that correspond with the history that I'm telling, so that you can check for yourself to see if I'm full of it or not. So let's begin with the history of the church, a summary. We're going to begin in 3200 with the Sumerian Empire controlling Babylon, and you can find that here. Then we get to 3000 BC, where Jericho flourished, and then we get to 2700, where the real Gilgamesh lived, and you can read about that here. Then we get to the Great Pyramids in the Old Kingdom of Egypt being erected. Then we get to Sargon the Great. He dies at around 2305 BC. In 2000 BC, the Hittite kingdom begins, and the Amorites take what is modern Palestine. In 2000 BC also, the Epic of Gilgamesh is compiled. Here is the Epic of Gilgamesh. In 1950 BC, Ur falls. In sometime between 1894 and 1595 BC, the first lines of the Enuma Elish are written in stone, and this is the Babylonian story of creation. This is the Enuma Elish. Enuma Elish. Okay. Then we get in 1754 BC, the Hammurabi Code. Sometime between 1700 and 1550 BC, the Hakos, that is a Proto-Hebrew dynasty, rules in Palestine, Egypt, and Syria. Also in 1700, the Atarhasis, the Akkadian version of the Noah flood story, is written. And this is the Atarhasis. Oh, this is what this video is, so if this is going to bore you, feel free to jump out. In 1620 through 1548, the Ippur Papyrus places a Proto-Hebrew speaking Semitic people in Egyptian lands in positions of power and in the same regions as Joseph's Genesis tell. In 1500 BC, the legal framework across Mesopotamia matches what is described in Genesis. In 1468 BC, the first major battle of Megiddo takes place. In 1300 BC, the Battle of Kadesh happens. This is a super major important battle that influences everything going forward in this culture, and even for us today. In 1290 through 1224 BC, Ramses II and Ramses III rule in the new kingdom of Egypt. And you can read about that here. In 1220 BC, the first mention of the Israelites in Canaan records occur. In 1213 through 1203 BC, the victory still of Merapath mentions Israel in Canaan. In around approximately 1200 BC, the Trojan War coincides with the fall of the Hittite Empire. And you can read about that here. In 1220, the Assyrian Empire controls Babylon. Sometime around 1000 BC to 961 BC, King David of Israel comes into rule. For that, you do need the Bible. Then in around 965 through 931, King Solomon rules Israel. Again, you need the Bible for that one. From 922 BC, the divided kingdom of Israel and Judah occurs. Again, you need the Bible for that. And from 840 BC, a Moabite stele is erected that corresponds with the battle that you see at 2 Kings chapter 3, verse 5. And this is the moment when biblical history and other written histories from other cultures sync up for the first time. In 753 BC, Rome is founded, and you can read about that here in Livy. In 721 BC, Israel falls to the Assyrians under Sargon II. In 700 BC, Homer composes the Iliad and the Odyssey, which you can read here. In 609, we get a major battle at Megiddo. At 587 BC, Judah falls to Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar II. And we now need the Bible again. And this is the Tanakh, and this will have the story from the Hebrew point of view, from a Hebrew translation about what happened. Then, in 587 BC, many Jews dispersed to Egypt. In 539 or 538 BC, Cyrus the Great allows Jews to return to Zion. In 520 to 515 BC, the temple is rebuilt. In 509 BC, we get the birth of the Roman Republic, which again can be read about in Livy. In 486 BC, the Persian Empire rules Babylon. In 440 BC, Jerusalem is rebuilt. From 336 to 323 BC, Alexander the Great conquers Greece, Egypt, and the Persian Empire. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great conquers Tyre, and with it, Israel. And you can read about that here in Arrian. Also Rufus, also Xenophon. From about 323 BC till about 36 BC, we get the Hellenistic period in Jerusalem. In 305 BC, the Ptolemaic dynasty begins in Egypt. The Seleucids and the Parthian empires also rise. In 258 to 246, under Ptolemy II in Alexandria, Egypt, the Bible is completed into one work and translated from the Hebrew into Greek. Let me read that again. Under Ptolemy II in Alexandria, by about 246 BC, the Bible is collected into one work and translated from Hebrew into Greek. Then from 167 to 134 BC, we get the Maccabean period in Israel. And to read about that, you need a Catholic Bible, because they have those sections. Also, an Orthodox Bible has more stories from that period. From 63 BC, Rome under the command of Pompey, conquers Palestine. You can read about that in Polybius. In 44 to 24 BC, we get the birth of the Roman Empire, which again can be read about in Polybius. And then from 40 to the year 4 BC, King Herod rules Israel as a vassal for Rome. Then we get to the ADs. From 26 to 36 AD, Pontius Pilate is the prefect of Judea. At around 30 or 33 AD, Jesus dies. At around 42 AD, Agrippa persecutes Christians in Jerusalem. To read about the earlier period of that, there is Cassius Dio, Roman history, the reign of Augustus. There is Sallust, the Catiline War, the Jacruthian War, and the histories. This will also cover Pompey. And then we get to the 12 Caesars with Suetonius. Suetonius and the 12 Caesars will cover the next piece that I will talk about. In 42 AD, Agrippa persecutes the Christians in Jerusalem. From 46 to 53 AD, you get Paul's ministries, which again for that you're going to need the Bible and read the epistles. In 48 AD, Peter writes his epistles. In 49 AD, the Jews are expelled from the city of Rome, and the first Christian council in Jerusalem is held. Now notice, that was in 49 AD, the first Christian council was held in Jerusalem. From 54 to 68 AD, Nero is emperor of Rome, and he hates Christians. And again, you can read about that in Suetonius. In 50 AD, Christians enter Egypt in significant numbers. In 52 AD, Paul writes his first epistles. Again, you need the Bible for that. In 64 AD, Christians are blamed for the burning of Rome. Again, see Suetonius. In 64 AD, Peter and Paul die in Rome. In 65 through 73 AD, we have the Jewish War. And the Jewish War and the customs around it can be found in the Dead Sea Scrolls and Josephus. So read Josephus. From 65 through 75 AD, the Gospel of Mark was written in Greek. In 66 AD, there was another Jewish revolt, again see Josephus. In 69 through 156 AD, Saint Polycarp, a direct disciple of the Apostle John, is active as a recorder of Christian traditions and customs. Some of his works still survive. In 70 AD, Jerusalem is sacked. In 73 AD, we get the fall of Masada, which again, see Josephus. From 91 to 101 AD, Clement I is Pope in Rome. In 96 AD, John writes his gospel. In 100 AD, Josephus and Tacitus both mention Christians in their writings. And that'll be in the Annals and the Histories. Now, I just want to be clear. That's in 100 AD, Josephus and Tacitus both mention Christians in their writings. And at that same time period, the last living apostle dies, and Saint Ignatius is the first to use the term Catholic to describe the Catholic Church. And you can read about that in the early writings of the Catholic Church or in his own writings. Then Saint Justin Martyr is active as a prolific Catholic writer. And in 135, all Jews are expelled from the Holy Land, which can be read about in the lives of the later Caesars. In 169 through 225 AD, Tertullian is active as a Catholic writer, which can be read about in the writings of the early Christians, as his writings are in there. In 177, Saint Irenaeus writes on heresies, and Gnosticism is on the rise, which you can read about here. In 190 AD, the first Christian academy is open. In 200, Christian persecution begins in full. In 250 through 356, monasticism in Christianity begins. In 251, the first case for the primacy of the Pope over the other patriarchs is argued in The Unity of the Church by Saint Anthony of Carthage, which you can just go read his work. In 260 through 339 AD, Eusebius of Caesarea is alive, and he writes the first history of the Catholic Christian Church, and you can read his writings. In 297 through 373, Arianism is on the rise in Egypt. In 312 AD, Constantine has his vision of the cross and later converts to Christianity. In 313 AD, the Edict of Milan makes toleration of Christians legal in the Western Empire, but it does not make it the official religion. Christianity will not become the official religion of Rome until 380 AD under Emperor Theodorus. But I continue. In 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea defines the term Trinity. In 330 AD, construction of the first basilica in Rome begins. In 340 AD, the Roman Empire splits into East and West, which can be read about anywhere you want. Just pick up the Orthodox Bible, they'll talk about it in there. 363, the first recorded celebration of Christmas, or the Epiphany, is recorded on December 25th. In 367 AD, Saint Ignatius defines the New Testament canon as we roughly know it today. And you can read about that in the later Christian fathers, in his own words. In 381, the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed defines what Christianity is and isn't. Go to any Roman Catholic or Orthodox Catholic church and they say it, but these documents also still exist and are in the Vatican archives, which you can go and access on the internet. In 410, the sacking of Rome and the end of the Western Empire occurs, which you can read about in the later Roman emperors. The later Roman emperors. In 422, we have the first recorded persecution of an atheist by Christians. And this happens to a woman named Hypatia, a Roman citizen. In 429 AD, St. Jerome gives us the Latin Bible, which you can buy online. In 432 AD, St. Patrick and Catholicism enters Ireland. In 440 AD, the Pope acts as a representative for Western power for the first time in history with his diplomacy and his embassy to Attila the Hun, or with Attila the Hun, or for Attila the Hun. Basically, he talks to Attila the Hun and keeps Attila the Hun from attacking Rome. In 441, Christ's two natures is defined. In 455, Rome falls to the Vandals. In 476, the last Roman emperor is overthrown. In 480, we get the birth of the Benedictine order. Welcome to celibacy, priest. In 484, we have the first schism of the Catholic Church, when the Constantinople Patriarch secedes. In 491, we have the second schism, when the Armenian Church secedes. In 496, the France, as the Franks become Catholic, which you can read about in the history of the Franks. In 504, we get the legend of King Arthur, as it comes together for the first time. In 539, the Byzantine-Persian Wars begin. In 570 through 632 AD, Muhammad and Islam is on the rise in Arabia. And you can read about that in the Quran and also the Hadith. In 587 AD, Spain becomes Catholic. In 587 AD, Italy becomes Catholic. In 590 through 604 AD, Pope Gregory becomes the first pope to grab secular power. In 596 AD, Britain becomes Catholic. In 592 through 594, a plague kills off half of the population in Europe. In 604 AD, Pope Gregory becomes the first pontiff to assert primacy over the other patriarchs. In 632 AD, Arab Muslims conquer Jerusalem and Carthage. In 640 AD, the Library of Alexandria is destroyed in the name of the new Muslim religion. In 643 AD, the Dome of the Rock is built. In 661 AD, the Sunni-Shia split in Islam occurs. In 672 through 735 AD, Catholic Saint Bede writes the history of the English people as we know it today. From 675 through 749, we get the Christian hymns which are composed for the first time, which you can read that in any Christian hymn book. From 725 to 842, we get the first iconoclasm controversy. In 756, the Papal States begin. In 787, the Second Council of Nicaea restores holy images to a state of veneration. In 800, Pope Leo II crowns Charlemagne emperor. In 846, Arabic warriors sack Rome. In 850, we get the birth of feudalism. In 853, we get the first book printed in China. In 880, Emperor St. Basil retakes Italy from the Arabs. In 1961 through maybe 1021, Leif Erikson reaches and then abandons the outer coast of North America. In 966, Poland becomes Catholic. In 974, Pope Benedict institutes monasticism reforms in making celibacy mandatory. In 1009, Muslims sack Jerusalem and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. In 1054, the Roman Catholic Eastern Orthodox split called the Great Schism occurs, which you can read a little bit about here in the lives of the Byzantine rulers. Then from 1096 to 1099, we get the First Crusade. It's launched to retake Jerusalem. And you can read about the Crusades in Usama ibn Makinhek and in Jonaville and Valhardin. Then in 1446, the Second Crusade is launched. Then in 1189, the Third Crusade is launched, this time to take back the Holy Land from Saladin. From 1204, the Fourth Crusade is launched, this time to take back Constantinople. And in 1265 through 1321, Dante's Divine Comedy is composed. Dante. 1233, the Inquisition is established. In 1291, the Final Crusade ends. In 1302, Pope Boniface VIII pushes the power and authority of the office of Pope beyond its acceptable limits. In 324 through 1384, Catholic John Wycliffe translates the Bible into English, giving the first well-known formulation of sola scriptura. From 1337 through 1453, we get the 100 Years' War. From 1347 through 1349, Black Death wipes out 2/3 of Europe. In 1422 through 1431, St. Joan of Arc lives, and you can read about her either from Mark Twain or there's another famous writer who wrote about her. From 1435, Pope Eugene IV condemns slavery and human bondage. From 1441, the African to Europe slave trade begins. From 1451 through 1504, Queen Isabella takes back Spain from the Muslim Moors. In 1453, Constantinople falls to the Turks. In 1445, the Gutenberg Bible is printed. From 1469 to 1536, Erasmus sharply criticizes the growing corruption in the Catholic Church. In 1479, the Spanish Inquisition begins. And you can read about this period from both Machiavelli, the prince, and by reading about the Borgias. In 1492, Moorish Spain falls, and Christopher Columbus makes his famous journey introducing Christianity to the New World. And you can read about that in the journeys of, in the 4 voyages of Christopher Columbus, written by him, by the way. In 1493, the Pope divides the New World among Spain and Portugal, which you can read a little bit about in The Conquest of New Spain by Bernal Diaz. Also in The Conquest of Peru, which that one's an ugly story. We're almost done. In 1512, Martin Luther is excommunicated and the Protestant Reformation has begun. And you can read about that from Martin Luther himself. Sometime between 1532 and 1534, Henry VIII breaks from the Catholic Church and starts the Anglican Church of England. In 1537, Pope Paul III condemns the mistreatment of native and indigenous people. In 1582, the Reims Catholic New Testament is printed in English. And in 1611, the King James Anglican Bible is completed, which you can read here. And just for good measure, if you want to read a little bit more about how our concepts of heaven and hell changed over time, you then get Paradise Lost, which the second edition was released in 1674. So there you go. That's the history of the Catholic Church and the development of theological ideas as it relates to the Abrahamic faiths. I hope you enjoyed it. This was long and a little bit boring. I hope the intro made it worth it. Talk to you all later. Peace, like, and subscribe.